Well, let me begin by thanking C-SPAN for the opportunity to be interviewing Nomi Prins, who is the author of It Takes a Pillage, Behind the Bailouts, Bonuses, and Backroom Deals from Washington to Wall Street. When I was in the House for 16 years, I served on the Financial Services Committee, so I have some familiarity with this issue, and needless to say, I have been actively involved in it in the last 3 years in the Senate. Nomi, thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to be here as well today, Senator.
Nomi, let's begin with a little bit of background about you. Where were you born, and what happened in your life to have you end up on Wall Street and write the books that you've written?
Well, I was born in upstate New York in Poughkeepsie, right outside of Vassar College, where my father had at one point been a professor, and then he was working in research at IBM there. It was very much an IBM town at the time, and we were very much a mathematical type of family, a lot of work with numbers from a very, very young age. And I ultimately wound up going to a state school, to SUNY Purchase, a little closer to New York City, getting closer to Wall Street to some extent, where I studied mathematics. And I minored in music, but my father said math is really the way to get a decent living and find a job. And as it turned out, that was true, because ultimately that was what was being hired on Wall Street at the time. A lot of math and engineering and computer science were really the degrees that the street was looking for. And so what I really just wanted to do is move to New York, as you do when you graduate college. And I wound up getting my first job at Chase, Manhattan Bank, before it was part of JP Morgan Chase, when I graduated. Actually, before I graduated, even I was 19. I sort of did a transition.
You were 19.
Yes, I was, and I started there doing a lot of analysis and sort of computer work and numerical work on.
So what was wrong with you? Why, when others are partying and having a great time, did you end up on Wall Street?
I was way too serious. I think I was the oldest child in the family, and I think that might have had something to do with it. That sort of sense of responsibility and financial independence and everything else. I think I somehow wound up over there, and I figured I was only going to be there for a year or two and sort of work in musical theater or something else in New York instead. And as it turned out, I wound up staying there a very long time through a number of different firms. And I think it just became easy to some extent, with all of the hardness that comes with Wall Street and within Wall Street firms. You did make enough money to pay rent in New York City and everything else. Nothing like the kinds of sums that are being made today, but certainly enough to live on your own.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, you write your book, in a sense, as being in the belly of the beast, so to speak. You were there.
Yes.
So what impact on your views, on your life views about Wall Street, occurred as a result of your working for Goldman Sachs? How many years did you work for Goldman Sachs?
I was at Goldman Sachs for 2 years. It was the end of my career on Wall Street. I actually ejected myself from Wall Street after having been at Goldman Sachs.
And Bear Stearns you worked in as well?
And at Bear Stearns as well. I was over in London actually for Bear Stearns. I ran an analytics group there for 7 years. So that was really the crux of a lot of the work I was doing on Wall Street and internationally. And then I came to Goldman.
So what impact did your experience on Wall Street have on your views? What did you learn? You were on the inside. Most of us are not on the inside. What was it like?
One of the things you know on the inside, and you learn on the inside, is there is such a tremendously competitive environment, which there aren't a lot of other places. But in Wall Street, it's almost like you come in every single day, and the higher you move up in a firm, the more this is the case. Every single day, trying to figure out how much credit you can take for a particular trade. If you can beat someone on another desk or in another area of the firm, you actually race to the offices of senior management in order to be able to tell them what you did to take part in a certain deal or a transaction, and very much becomes this immediate type of an environment where if you don't do that, you don't succeed. And if you're someone who wants to try and succeed, you sort of get involved in this game. And I ultimately found that very distasteful and really quite empty. But the environment is very much like that. It's very intense from a gamesmanship and a power sort of play, as well as it's really like a military strategy almost every day going in. It's literally from whose name you put on an email first, to whose office you go into first, to who you tell about a certain trade before someone else knows.
Sounds a little like the United States Congress, but that's another story. But let me ask you a question I think that is on the minds of millions of Americans. Right now, we are in the most serious economic decline since the Great Depression. If you add up the number of people who are unemployed, underemployed, and given up looking for work, 17% of the American adult workforce is in that position. It is a disaster. People have lost their homes, they've lost their savings, they've lost their pensions, all because, in my view at least, of the greed of the people on Wall Street. Now, one of the first question I want to ask you is, some people say, well, nobody could have predicted this. My God, it just came out of the blue. It was just amazing, totally unpredictable. How do you respond to that?
It was absolutely predictable for a lot of reasons. One is that mentality in the street. The reason this crisis happened was because there was a desire to find products and to create assets within Wall Street that made money. And they don't really care. It doesn't matter to Wall Street firms what those assets are. It turned out that they created assets out of a small amount of subprime loans. And when I say a small amount, I look at it like it's an upside-down pyramid, where at the bottom point you have subprime loans. And 1.4 trillion of those were issued during 2002 to 2007. But what Wall Street does is it takes them and it creates new securities, this whole other band of securities. And from those, it can make fees, it can make trading commissions, and a lot of other profits. They made $300 billion just on creating securities out of these loans. Not on even trading them back and forth, just on the sheer creation of these securities during those same years. And then what they do is they take those securities, they borrow against them to create new ones and to merge and to acquire and to trade and to speculate. So it all goes upward. That's why this whole thing fell down. It wasn't that the subprime loans got wrong. It was that all of the securities and trading on top of them toppled over.
You know what? I think most people kind of scratch their head. And when they went to school and we learned about economics, you see somebody starts a business and maybe they sell automobiles, and maybe they sell clocks, maybe they sell shoes, maybe they manufacture these things. So here's my really tough question for you. What the hell do they do on Wall Street? What do they make? What do they produce?
Well, they produce assets that only have value because they choose to say that they have value. There is no sheer production.
How does that improve my life or your life or my kids' lives?
It absolutely doesn't, and that's a really good analysis of the street. The Wall Street exists, and particularly investment banks and the most speculative components of banks exist purely to create, to engineer. That's what they talk. It's engineering assets. It's not engineering a train track. It's not engineering a building. It's engineering something that only has value because they say it does, and it gets its value from that. I have a quote in my book, which is great, from the senior partner at Goldman Sachs who left the firm to actually go to Morgan Stanley and was quite senior there, who said it's one of the only, finance is one of the only arts that's basically, or science is created, predicated on the creation of absolutely nothing. And it's only by pushing that nothing for something throughout the system, because people continue to buy it, that this continues to churn, and you create these sort of upside down pyramids of risk and assets that don't truly have intrinsic value.
So at a time when our manufacturing capability is declining, when we've lost millions of good manufacturing jobs, our infrastructure is in major disrepair, we desperately need scientists to help us deal with illnesses, et cetera, et cetera. We're seeing some of the best minds in the country going into a sphere of activity which produces virtually nothing that is useful to the ordinary person.
It is not useful to the ordinary person. It is purely the amount of profit. If you look at a company like Goldman Sachs, a top-tier investment firm, they pay almost 50% of their profits out in bonuses. In any type of production company or even retail company, the amount of money that's paid in terms of compensation is maybe 20% or 22%. So all of that extra fluff, all of that extra profit that's